For the first time since both companies were founded more than 100 years ago, both Canadian Pacific and Canadian National Railways are not running.
Breaking news, Canada has announced a $500 million investment to launch a new railway corridor designed to bypass United States ports.
Breaking tonight, Canada has just done something that quietly changed the balance of power in North America, and Washington didn't see it coming. While Donald Trump was threatening tariffs, talking toughness, and assuming the United States still controlled the region's trade lifelines, Canada made a single move that stripped that leverage away. No speeches, no confrontation. Just steel, tracks, and a $500 million decision that rewired the continent. And now, Trump is realizing the control he thought he had is already gone. For decades, one assumption shaped American power over Canada: if you control the ports, the inspections, and the routes, you control the trade. Canadian grain, energy, and exports flowed south, touched U.S. infrastructure, passed through American bottlenecks, and remained vulnerable to American politics. That assumption allowed Washington to apply pressure without ever firing a shot. Tariffs, delays, inspections, and threats were enough. Until now, because while Trump was focused on punishment, Canada focused on escape. Quietly, methodically, Canada expanded the only single-line railway that links Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Canadian Pacific Kansas City, a 32,000-kilometer rail network stretching from the Canadian prairies to the heart of Mexico, became something far more dangerous than a railway. It became a land bridge that bypasses American control entirely. Grain loaded in Manitoba now rolls straight to Mexican cities without touching a single U.S. port, without relying on U.S. inspectors, and without exposure to Trump's trade chaos. This is the part Trump didn't calculate. The $500 million investment wasn't symbolic, it was physical. Thousands of high-capacity hopper cars, dozens of Tier 4 locomotives, expanded rail yards, crew hiring, infrastructure that will last decades, not election cycles. This wasn't a reaction to one tariff threat. It was preparation for a future where American unpredictability is permanent. And suddenly, the leverage vanished. For years, American ports captured enormous value from Canadian exports. Fees, inspections, handling, shipping services, delays that cost money but generated U.S. revenue. Seattle, Portland, Houston, New Orleans all benefited from Canadian goods passing through. That money flowed straight into the American economy. With one rail corridor, a massive share of that revenue simply disappears. Trains cross U.S. territory without stopping, like aircraft flying overhead. Legal, protected, untouchable under trade law. Trump can't tariff it, he can't block it, he can't inspect it, and he can't slow it down. That's the shock. While Trump assumed Canada needed American permission to trade, Canadian grain began feeding Mexican consumers directly. While Trump threatened economic pain, Canadian exporters quietly found certainty. And while Washington talked about control, Ottawa invested in independence. Mexico is the key that makes this irreversible. With a population of more than 130 million and a rapidly growing middle class, Mexico is not an alternative market. It's a replacement. Mexican demand for high-quality grain is rising, and Canadian wheat is premium. High protein. Consistent. Reliable. And now, delivered by a single rail system with predictable timing and pricing. No border drama, no political interference, just trade. This is why the move cuts so deep. Before, if Washington wanted to apply pressure, it could delay shipments, tighten inspections, or threaten ports. Now, Canadian exporters don't need those ports. They don't need those inspections. And they don't need American goodwill. The entire system was redesigned to remove the United States as a gatekeeper. And this wasn't accidental. Canadian leaders saw the pattern early. Tariffs announced, paused, re-announced, trade agreements questioned, allies treated like adversaries. Every threat made long-term planning impossible. Exporters don't survive on slogans, they survive on predictability. So Canada built predictability into steel and rail. The result is a permanent shift. Rail infrastructure doesn't disappear when administrations change. Hopper cars last 30 to 40 years. Locomotives last decades. Tracks laid today will still carry freight long after Trump, long after current governments, long after the headlines fade. Once Mexican buyers establish relationships with Canadian suppliers, those relationships stick. Trust replaces dependency, and the old routes quietly die. This is why Trump's shock is real. His strategy depended on the idea that Canada had nowhere else to go. That assumption collapsed the moment the first full grain train rolled into Mexico City without touching a U.S. port. Suddenly, threats sounded empty. Tariffs lost their bite. Pressure lost its force. And here's the part no one in Washington wants to say out loud: this model can be repeated. If Canada can reroute grain, it can reroute energy. If it can reroute agriculture, it can reroute manufacturing. Infrastructure is policy. Steel outlasts speeches. And every time Canada invests in alternatives, American leverage shrinks a little more. Trump didn't lose control in a press conference. He lost it in rail yards, in procurement contracts, in long-term planning documents no one in Washington bothered to read. And that's why this matters far beyond grain. This is what modern power looks like. Not confrontation, not retaliation. Quiet substitution. You don't fight the gatekeeper. You remove the gate. By the time Washington notices, the traffic has already moved elsewhere. Canada didn't challenge the United States. Canada outgrew it. And now, Trump is left reacting to a reality he can't reverse. The trains are running. The contracts are signed. The markets have shifted. And the leverage he once believed was permanent has already slipped through his fingers. This wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was decisive. And tonight, the message is clear. North American trade no longer flows only through American hands. Canada made sure of that, quietly, permanently, and without asking permission.